For over half a century, humans have endeavored to make business a force for good. But is the movement working? Or is it time to explore a new path forward? Welcome to Less Talk, More Action. We are your hosts, Joel Caesar and Owen Barrett, experts in clean energy, net zero real estate, decarbonization, and entrepreneurship. In each episode, we ask provocative questions and share stories from the front lines of sustainability with leaders in science, tech, and business, taking real action to design a cleaner, better future. Thanks for joining the conversation. Now, let's get to work. Welcome to Less Talk, More Action podcast. My name is Joel Caesar, the world's undisputed voice of building decarbonization. Joining me as always is Owen Barrett. We're workshopping his nickname. I think now we're going to call him, instead of the Adam Newman of Green Building, the world's foremost expert on solar. I don't know. You need something a little more catchy.
Yeah, we'll work on it.
Okay. Still workshopping it. Feel free to ping the show if you guys have ideas for what we're supposed to call Owen. But today's guest, Julia Pyper, a Vice President of Public Affairs at GoodLeap and host of the award-winning Political Climate podcast. So she was a cool guest, right in our wheelhouse, because I really appreciate her multi-dimensional approach to her career. She's got podcasts. She's worked in policy. She's at a startup fintech company. She's trying to solve the problem from multiple fronts, which I think we need more of. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it was cool to learn about her journey from journalist to policy person to, I don't know her title, but someone pretty senior at a pretty impressive clean tech startup or fintech clean tech combo. I thought it was a great episode.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've ever, Owen, watched or listened to her podcast, Political Climate. I have, and I would encourage all of our guests, our audience as well. It's a really cool, very politically focused, which you and I, joke about, we try to stay out of. But in their conversation, there's conservative, liberal hosts, guests, and they try to bring on experts that have worked in different administrations and are all trying to solve similar problems. And it's really refreshing to listen to a podcast where you hear someone who worked in the Trump administration versus someone who worked in the Obama administration agree on a lot. And so, yeah. I mean, that's another theme I think we need more of, is this centrist approach to how we progress the industry.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Okay, so before we dive into Julia, though, let's dive into a segment we're calling, I don't know what we should call this, but essentially we're gonna
About damn time.
We're gonna address the state of Montana calling out the big tech companies for what they claim are misleading, deceptive, marketing materials about net zero and 100% renewable energy. So I won't read the entire letter here, but the state of Montana Attorney General wrote a letter at the end of September 24th, addressed to leaders at Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, and Google. And essentially, it's a very detailed document where they're attacking those tech companies for claiming to be 100% renewable energy and how that's, one, misleading to the public. And then they go on to state further that not only is it misleading, but it's leading to other detrimental outcomes for folks, Montana citizens and citizens around the country. So I know you have lots of thoughts on this because there's discussions about RECs and unbundled RECs and how this whole ecosystem works. So I'm going to let you respond to that first, and then I want to dive into another section later in the letter here.
I mean, I feel like for as long as this podcast has been going on, and even earlier in our careers, we've been calling out the bullshit that carbon offsets are. It's about time. I'm glad someone other than us is calling out the deceptive nature of these things. I think it's problematic for twofold. I think it gives people hope that these companies are actually doing something, which I'd argue, they're not. I don't think there's a lot of research done into how credible are these carbon offsets. And then the second one that's potentially more alarming now in this era of data centers and AI is I think this gives consumers the false hope that because these data centers are running in air quotes renewable energy, it's not going to affect their power bills. And buying carbon offsets has zero impact on the demand that these data centers are putting on the grid, which leads to increased prices. So I think we just need to get rid of them.
Well, for the record, first, I will state I worked at one of these big tech companies. I don't think they're doing nothing, as you might have just said. They're doing a lot to try to address their carbon footprint.
Why do they put more money
emissions.
into carbon offsets than actual decarbonization?
Well, we can talk about how they prioritize and where they're spending their budgets and whether or not we agree with that. But I won't agree with they're doing nothing. I was there. There's a lot of really smart people trying to do things that those companies don't have to do. So let's give them credit. Now, that said, you're using the term carbon offset. They talk a lot about RECs. So we should, for our audience, some of our audience probably knows more about this than we, but like those are two different things in the world of this nerdy 100% renewable, net zero climate commitment world, right?
It's different but similar. I mean, I put them in the same category in terms of, I think RECs are more legitimate than carbon offsets, but still it's a way to, in my perspective, it's a way to get people to think you're doing one thing that's going to lead to a certain end result, and it's deceptive because people don't understand that the renewable energy that these data centers are supposedly running on could be in a different country.
Yeah, so maybe explain. Let's not say carbon offset. You probably know a lot about RECs, renewable energy credit. What is it?
So it's 1 megawatt hour of renewable energy generated, equivalent to. So you're not actually getting the power from said renewable energy project. You're getting the renewable energy credit from that project being built.
The so-called environmental attribute of that power that's already being generated by someone else's capital.
If
someone else's
Facebook
risk.
gets RECs from a renewable project in Europe, how is that benefiting Americans? Outside of the emissions, which agreed is part of the problem, but increased electricity bills will still result. So I think that's where the deceptive nature comes in.
And even that REC, that example, this term we've talked about before, we talked about it with the guy, the carbon removal guy, this additionality term. So I don't know, I guess the tech companies or this whole market would argue that if not for these demand for RECs for companies trying to reduce or mitigate their scope 2 emissions, then a lot of these large-scale renewable energies might not happen. There's calculus that goes into the underwriting of that project in Europe relying on these REC purchases. Is that fair?
I mean, yeah, it's additive to the financial returns. You know, would it not happen without them? I don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
I think you're talking about like basis points in the overall IRR. It's not what drives a project.
Okay, so RECs, carbon offsets aside, I think we can agree, like, you know, maybe not helping the average American. Now this letter from the Montana Attorney General really goes on to hit that more head on and says, tech company climate commitments are leading to deals that could lock consumers out of reliable power. So they're criticizing this new wave of data center moves and how if Amazon or one of the companies is dropping a data center in a grid, they're coming and saying, well, we're going to make sure that we claim that whole thing's running on renewable energy because we're going to repower some nuclear facility that's within the same grid. And sometimes maybe even at least alleged by this attorney general, like directly connecting that nuclear power plant to the Amazon data center, essentially preventing the whole other actors in that grid from accessing that nuclear power. And it's like, I don't know. Is that fair? Is that a fair accusation here by the Attorney General of Montana that this is going to lead to worse conditions for average Americans paying their electricity prices?
I mean, I think it's going to be really hard to decipher what happens over the next 5 years. I think you're going to see electricity prices go up, and I think a lot of people are going to point the finger at tech, and then they're going to say, well, it's not us because we struck this deal with this we brought this nuclear plant online, or we're doing these REC deals, overseas, so it's not us. And it's going to be really hard to figure out.
Yeah, and it's, as we, you and I are both fans of the All In podcast. On one of their recent shows, they got into this a little bit. They were even talking to Sachs as the AI czar about what his concerns or their country's concerns might be about AI being blamed for electricity prices. And I think there was like a implication in this conversation that it was, that's definitely a future that is at risk. And I think you and I both were annoyed by some of the guests or the hosts on that show, which often claim to be, calling balls and strikes, but didn't call out how Sachs in this current administration wouldn't say the words battery or renewable energy. Yeah, he was just like, he's diesel power and generators backups. Like he just, it was clear he wasn't allowed to say like clean tech batteries. I mean, and how annoying it was that Chamath and JCal didn't call that out in real time.
No, it's like they're more interested in getting an invitation to the White House than they are calling it how it is.
Yeah. And because then later on Twitter, Chamath is there retweeting and making multiple statements about how wind and solar and batteries are the way to deploy energy quickly here in this country. And the only way we're going to solve this crisis not going off a cliff. So
I mean, it's insane to talk about energy generation in the next 5 years and not mention batteries, solar, wind. It's the only thing that will come online.
yeah.
So
I think it's gonna.
yeah,
This is gonna come back to bite the Republicans in the ass. This commitment, like you probably saw this huge Bureau of Land Management just canceled some giant solar project in Nevada. It was like that's in the middle of nowhere.
Like,
that was a good thing.
Doing?
Everyone's gonna be like, why didn't we do that? That was nuts.
Yeah.
All the millions and billions of dollars in soft costs, they're now just gonna be flushed down the toilet because of
when we're all working for China in 10 years. It's gonna be this. This is gonna be why.
Well, I mean, hopefully we get to a point where it's like, okay, the liberal Democrat side, through Obama and Biden, the last 15 years of our professional career, we got too far into this climate puritanism. Like, if you're not only renewable energy, then we're not going to talk to you, and we won't entertain gas or anything else. That was a mistake. But that led to this overcorrection from the right being like, well, you get Trump, someone being like, I don't give a shit if it makes sense. Even my Republican donors from red states asked me to continue it. I'm canceling renewable energy projects because I have a vendetta against it. So, okay, let's wash away the last 20 years of the politicism of this and get back to like, oh, actually now clean energy wins. So why don't we all just stop calling it climate and agree to like get the regulations out of the way to let these large scale projects deploy?
Yeah. Let's let energy is energy. Let's not differentiate where it comes from. We need more of it. I'm an advocate, obviously, of clean energy, but I'm not going to be unrealistic and expect that no fossil fuel generation is going to come online. Let's just be realistic about how this is going to play out, and it's going to require all technologies.
Yeah, and I think less regulation going to continue to support that approach.
Yeah.
Well, interesting stuff as always here on the Let's Talk More Action podcast, and this is a great segue into a really fun conversation with Julia. So, without further ado, let's jump into the conversation with Julia Pyper. Joining us today is Julia Pyper, Vice President of Public Affairs at GoodLeap and host of the award-winning Political Climate podcast. Julia is an accomplished journalist and communications leader who has covered the global clean energy transition for more than a decade. Her reporting has appeared in Green Tech Media and E&E News with bylines in Scientific American, HuffPost, the New York Times, and other major outlets. She's recognized as one of the most trusted voices connecting policy, technology, and climate innovation. At GoodLeap, Julia leads efforts to advance sustainable finance and storytelling that accelerates the shift to a clean energy future. So, Julia, welcome to the Let's Talk More Action podcast.
Hey, so great to be here. Always awkward to hear your own bio. I don't know why, every time.
Is it as bad as hearing your own voice? Which one's worse?
No, they're both terrible. But it's an honor, and I'm glad to get to join you guys. I've been listening to the show and great conversations.
Well, it's not as bad as me having to look at Owen's face, so we'll start there.
Oh, zing.
Well, Julia, besides jokes aside, we like to get right to work here on the show, and we start our guests off with the same question. How are you taking action to make the world a better place?
Yeah, I am a mom of a 2-year-old with another on the way, and I feel like I'm not taking enough action lately. There's so many diapers, and I'm just like watching my landfill contribution grow, and it's hard. Look, I think we all struggle with how do you have enough impact. I like to think I'm making a change by working in the sustainability space and dedicating my career to advancing and scaling clean energy solutions. But I do also think there's a role for individuals, and we'll unpack this hopefully more as we get into what GoodLeap does and some other stuff. But I live in Los Angeles, bought a house a few years ago, and we did a renovation. So we made the switch to an induction stove. We had a heat pump put in our garage addition. We swapped out for drought-resistant landscaping that are on irrigation timers instead of grass. We have a smart thermostat, and we put in the plug, the 240-volt plug for an EV charger, although we don't have the EV yet. But when the walls are open is a great time to make those switches. But we also learned that it's kind of hard. We had an air conditioner in the house that was only a year old when we bought it. So you're not going to rip out a gas-powered AC that's brand new and put in a new one at that point in time. So it really illuminated for me the point in time at which you make these changes and how challenging that can be in the real world. So I have a lot of empathy for all of us on this sustainability journey. I wish I could be 100% everything tomorrow, but I think what I try to think about is how do we map these sustainability solutions onto the real world and make them work for people? And my own experience kind of highlighted that, including even I live in an area that has rebates for heat pumps, and I didn't even get my paperwork in on time, so I missed it. Because the rebate was kind of awkward to know about, and you had to have a certain serial number, and then the sticker was kind of ripped, and you're like, whoa, like if I work in this space and can't make this work, what's the average consumer experience like?
Yeah. It's nuts.
So I like to think I'm making an impact in those small ways, step by step, and hopefully helping other people on their journey too.
I feel like we've all had that experience where, whether it's yourself or someone in the sustainability space, you've tried to tap into these rebates or incentives, and it's like it's impossible to understand as someone who spends their entire life in this space. And that's like a great microcosm of what's wrong with our industry. It's too complicated and confusing. Yeah.
It could just be easier, right? And this is where I feel like public policy has a lot of great intentions, and like utilities set up these programs, but like we've got to marry that with the private sector and the lived consumer experience and make sure that people are fully accessing these incentives and tools and resources. And there's a lot of great work that's been done, don't get me wrong, but it's also an area of continued friction, and something I actually want us to tackle more and more at GoodLeap, because we help people make their homes more sustainable. So how can we take some of that friction out of the process? But yeah, it could be better.
I feel like sometimes when people run politicians' speeches through like AI tools, it says, what reading level is this at? It's at like a third grade reading level, so everybody understands. If you were to take that same concept and run these incentives through it, it'd be like PhD level understanding. Like it's impossible.
It's not, and like the contractors want to make life easy, and they have getting on to the next job, and so making their paperwork easier to process would be a big unlock. And this is where AI and digital tools could probably really help us all a lot if we can get our heads around automating paperwork in the policy realm, which is like a leap, I know, but we can do it, I think.
I've spent some time in city government, where I spent some time in that capacity on policy. I was in the Office of Sustainability for a very progressive city, and so I have empathy as well for that side of trying to create incentives that make sense, that comply with all the different competing interests that those cities and utilities have to deal with. That said, I feel like it's interesting. It's one of those places that's so ripe for AI to disrupt the government process. Incentives, rebates is one of them. Building and safety and the reading of plans is another. But it's also probably going to be a challenge because those are going to be the last entities that want to adopt new technology and will probably be afraid of it in a lot of ways. But I don't know. You probably know more than us on that front now. Like as someone who spends the time thinking a lot about policy.
Yeah, I mean, there's tools out there. Like without picking individual companies, like they've learned how to aggregate and scrub cities or utility websites to find all the rebates that are available, so you can talk to the customer about it at the point of sale too. That's another thing that's key. Is like if we want someone to make a transition to something that's not status quo, they need to see the benefits and understand how that product operates, which first of all, we have an education challenge of educating contractors on the new products that the manufacturers are making, because it's easy to talk about the thing you've always talked about for 20 years. So education's number one. But then also the incentives help maybe get that sale over the finish line to, say, a more efficient HVAC system or going electric. And so there's tools out there that start to make those rebates available and the education of them at the point of sale. I think that would be a big unlock, is if you can actually have an educated and accurate conversation that you could qualify for XYZ. And that may be the thing that gets the customer to make the leap to a technology they weren't otherwise going to get, and not just lock in their next, again, HVAC system with like for the next 15 years. We've missed that person's opportunity for a decade plus. Instead, we can get them to adopt something new. That demand signal goes back to the manufacturers. We scale from there. But we had to figure out how to get it right at the kitchen table conversation, or else you miss that window.
I have two thoughts. One is totally unrelated to this conversation, but have you guys ever thought about just replacing city councils with AI altogether? What's going to be the first city that does that?
I don't know about the council. That might be extreme because you're talking about representative government there. I think, again, working at a small city, it was Santa Monica, it was 90,000 people. I saw how that scale of government kind of works because those city council meetings get really lively, really active. People start to know each other. It's not as opaque. That said, again, I mentioned sort of the building plans and the building and safety department and the reading of giving permits. And I remember this was 2017. I got moved to our architecture services division. I was building a building. I was in charge of the building for the city, our own building. So I'd go down the hall and talk to my colleagues in building safety about getting permits, and it was just a disaster, and like a lot of cities are. No offense to the people there, but I remember thinking then, 2017, like this is something that technology has to disrupt someday. Like, what are we doing?
We tried. There was a bill in California this year that Senator Weider ran to try and make HVAC permitting streamlined, borrowing from the solar app technology that's designed to streamline solar permitting for on rooftops. And it died, which is a real shame because like the permitting number of permits for really anything in California in particular where I live is really low. And it's easy to point a finger at it's actually the consumer's choice, not even a contractor's choice to get something permitted. And a lot of consumers choose not to do it for various reasons. It's also just really painstaking and slow. And like your HVAC can go in a day, but your permit can take weeks, in some cases months, to have the HERS rater come out and do all these additional steps in the process. So if we want to fix that, we got to look at some technology tools, and they do exist. Like it's not all the way to like some whiz bang AI replacing government, but like solar app and streamlined software tools for permitting processes already exist. It's not rocket science. We just need to get that technology deployed.
Do you have an opinion of?
I saw someone joke recently that in 1937 or whenever the Golden Gate Bridge was built in the 30s. It took them 4 years to build the entire bridge across the ocean with the technology they had back then. And they were joking, it takes you 4 years to get a permit to fix your house in San Francisco these days.
Oh my God. I know. Things get overloved sometimes, which is a challenge. And it's a shame because sticking with this like sustainable home movement, first of all, I want to acknowledge that like there is a history of like oil companies going back to like the early 2000s having campaigns that kind of shifted responsibility for climate action onto the individual and away from corporations. So I want to kind of acknowledge that because individuals can't solve the whole climate crisis, right? We need systems change and things like that. But individuals aggregated together can also have a massive, massive impact. And our homes are one of the key places that can happen. So Rewiring America, a nonprofit, talks about how 40% of energy-related greenhouse gas emissions come from decisions made in the home. So that's, how you get your power, the car you drive, how you cook your food, heating and cooling, the way you live your life, and actually inherent decisions you're already making. You don't even have to go out of your way to make them. Those contribute to like 40% of energy-related greenhouse gas emissions. Not to mention people want a comfortable, safe home. They want to have healthy food, meaning it's cold when it needs to be cold and heated when it needs to be heated, and like these really basic essentials that I think everyone in the world should have access to. But all of that is a very frictionful area. And so one of the challenges we're trying to solve at GoodLeap is getting at not only the emissions, but like a comfort question, an essentials question for people who are making decisions already, from a new roof to an HVAC system, as we discussed, where they want to get their power and maybe generate it on their own, not to mention back up their power in the event of more frequent extreme weather events. Like that whole area is huge. We're talking like hundreds of billions of dollars market opportunity that already exists, by the way, because people are already replacing all of those things. But how do we shift it and tilt it into a slightly more sustainable realm? And maybe in a way that the customer doesn't even notice. In fact, hopefully they don't notice, because it's not like they need to go out of their way to do these things. I'm in the camp that you can still live the life you want to live, a little bit of the abundance mindset. I know that term's kind of overused and tortured lately, but you can have all the things you want, like TV when you want it turned on and hot food when you need it, and maybe save money and be more sustainable at the same time. Like we can do it.
Have you guys A/B tested the effectiveness of getting consumers to adopt sustainable technologies with sustainability in the pitch versus with not? Because I think we have a core thesis on this show that if we sort of stripped the sustainability whininess out of a lot of this,
or especially the word climate.
Yeah. Just like saying you will have a more comfortable home. This is a better car to drive. This will heat your food faster, but not talk about the kilowatt hours and the carbon and the polar bears and all that stuff that no one really cares about. Have you guys done that? And what are the results?
We have like we have these sort of like profiles, if you will, of like the type of consumer out there. And certainly there's like the sustainability minded person, to be clear. And that's actually what helped a lot of these technologies get to initial scale, right? Are people who just wanted to like do the right thing and were curious and felt connected to the environment. But
are they at scale yet though? Like is anything within the sustainability movement at scale. Solar's at 3% adoption. Like, that's not at scale.
Yeah,
And that's just one example. Like, heat pumps, not there. Convection ovens, not there. Battery storage, not there. EVs, not there. Like, I don't really think we're at scale yet.
I mean, I think it depends on like what like. Is it making up a majority of electricity generation, or like what do we count as scale? Because
I don't know. It's a good
we're
question.
talking double digits of renewable energy generation in this country, and the fastest growing source of energy in this country is wind and solar plus batteries. It was like 90+%, I think, last year, something to that effect. So to me, that's scale. When pretty much the only affordable thing to deploy right now are advanced clean technologies. To me, that means we've proven that it works. I mean, 5 million plus homes have solar on their roofs today. Not every home is suitable for solar. Not every home's going to get solar. But you couple that with multifamily buildings and commercial infrastructure, and like I think that's pretty reasonable scale. And it's continuing to grow all the time. And remember, heat pumps are new in a way, but like Florida and Maine already deploy tons of heat pumps. That's like the go-to technology. So even before there was a new renewed push to like
Southeast Asia has deployed them for a long time. Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. I kind of think we are at like, could we grow and become the dominant source of energy generation and supply and software? And yes, absolutely. And I think we should talk about where I think we are failing. But I think we're at the point where there's no question the technology exists and it works. Now we need business model innovation to continue, driving down costs and making it accessible. We obviously have everything from supply chains to worry about, thinking about tariffs here to making sure it's ethically developed. Like there are challenges along the way to making this better and better. But
I feel like
the alternative of just pulling stuff out of the ground, we're proving that there's a nice alternative and probably just better way of doing.
For the record, I'm a supporter of everything you just mentioned. I get a little worried when we get too comfortable. Like I think saying at scale maybe takes the foot off the gas pedal a little bit. Like, yeah, it's pedal? Going the right.
Yeah, because until we start shifting our language away from gas pedal, we got a problem.
Yeah,
up the accelerator.
I'm always in my internal team meetings right now, reminding people when they want to use parking lot in our whiteboarding sessions where to put this. I say, no, that's the bike rack, right? That's you got to change.
Yeah,
the
that's the bike rack, right?
Well, I mean, this is my fault as a host here. We haven't really done introductions. Like Julie, I don't know much about Owen. He runs a company that is really doing business model innovation around solar and multifamily, so he's very knowledgeable about that space. And I guess we should take a step back too for yourself. We just dove right in. One of the things that I like about you from afar that we haven't really met, but looking at your content and your background is very multidimensional. You work in policy, you're in journalism, communications, you're a podcaster, you have an entrepreneurial lens to your journey. So maybe we should stop for a minute and say, who is Julia Pyper? What are you working on?
Oh gosh, who is
world's
Julia Pyper?
Worst podcast host?
Yeah, I'm sorry. We just jump in, but let's learn about the guest here.
Let's get right to the heart of the matter. Gosh, I don't know. Who is Julia Pyper? That's a great question.
Still working on that?
Candidly, still working on that. I mean, it's a journey of self-discovery. I have to ask my therapist. No, let's see. I grew up in Canada, actually, and I live in California now, but I grew up on a horse farm. We actually... we had solar put on our horse farm like 20 years ago in Ontario, and there was a really compelling, I think it was a feed-in tariff at the time. And it's kind of funny, you look at this big open like field, and then we got solar smacked onto this barn. And my parents were kind of ahead of their time, I think, in realizing that there was real savings and benefit there, and wanted to do the right thing as well. Come from a mindset of thinking about climate, I think, as like a national security and national imperative. In Canada, like I remember reading articles my grandfather used to cut out of The Economist for me, and I've talked about this before, but it talked about like the icebreakers in the north and how we were going to have to invest more in like icebreaker technology because the ice was already starting to melt, but who was going to control the Arctic was now this national security question for Canada, for the US, vis-a-vis Russia. And just thinking about like climate was in the backdrop of that story. It was about like for military investments. But to me, that just made it so stark that like, it was like gravity. It's like, this is obviously happening. Temperatures are changing. How do we adapt our military to it? And that's just one of those moments I was like, whoa, this is not just a bespoke, do you care about the environment question? want to hug a tree. It's like, this is embedded in everything we touch and how we live our lives and how we're going to survive and prosper going forward. And so I think that's what's so fascinating about this whole climate issue, if you will, is it touches on every aspect of life. And so I thought journalism was the first place I wanted to go work on this. And so I moved to New York. I went to journalism school. I got into law school at the time. And I'm like, I'm going into journalism. And my parents were like, great, that's going to be a terrible journey for you. Going to the dying industry. But I ended up doing 11 years in journalism. I was lucky to work at different trade outlets like E&E News, which is a DC-based publication, was my first job. So running around Capitol Hill during the Obama administration at that time, I covered a lot of the like EV efficiency and electric standards, how they were ratcheting up at that time.
Yeah, what is E&E? Is that energy and environment? Is that what that stands for?
Yeah, energy and environmental news. Yeah, it's now part of Politico. Then joined Wood Mackenzie as a research firm. They had the news outlet Green Tech Media, a lot of GTM OGs out there who remember that publication that covered more of the startup ecosystem of companies at the grid edge and scaling clean energy technologies. And then from there, I think you mentioned at the beginning, I did some entrepreneurial stuff. I ended up getting some grants to go travel to India and China. And I went to Haiti and did a documentary on clean energy in Haiti, and did some kind of DIY work on my own. Got to work with New Energy Nexus, which is a startup accelerator program, and launched the podcast I host called Political Climate. So that was launched with support from the Schwarzenegger Institute at the University of Southern California. And Schwarzenegger himself, being, a titan of sustainability in his own right, Republican governor who really just saw the pragmatism of adopting these solutions and set a lot of the bedrock policies in place here. So it was awesome to work with him and his team. And we still actually do the podcast. And the whole conceit is like a Democrat and Republican, and I'm the host. And we hash out not whether climate change exists, but like, what are we going to do about it? And like, what are the pragmatic implications for the world? Because I actually think a lot of Republicans and Democrats, despite the headlines, like, there's a lot of acknowledgement that things are different or changing, but what we're going to do about it and the trade-offs, because there are trade-offs, are really important to hash out. And so getting away from the like sensationalism and just having these real conversations, I learn all the time from Republican lawmakers in my day job about like what their communities are facing. And it looks a little bit different. It sounds a little bit different, but like we have to have those conversations because there's no real choice. Like this is happening. And energy is embedded in all of that. Too. So flash forward at GoodLeap, a company that is a fintech solution company, true fintech. We finance home upgrades for people. So if they want a loan or a lease or tap to pay with their credit card, however they want to pay, we have the software that facilitates that and the capital markets relationships. And again, the software can help control those devices. So think about aggregating all the hundreds and thousands of customers we have with batteries or smart thermostats or heat pumps. We actually have the software to operate virtual power plants and respond to grid needs with our fleet.
That software is under the GoodLeap brand?
Yeah. So we call it Good Grid. And we've grown like 300% this year alone as we entered that space. And then we work with the contractors who go and build this stuff. So we have a lot of work with that, people having the kitchen table conversations, as well as the manufacturers who build the equipment to begin with. So we really sit at the like center point between capital markets, consumers, contractors, manufacturers, retailers, and try to provide that like fintech layer that connects all those players and reduces some of the friction in the space.
So on a previous show, we had the guys from Quilt on as a guest. And
Cool.
I live in New York. You know Quilt?
I actually don't know Quilt.
Oh, well, you should know them, 'cause especially they've launched in LA. So that's kind of a modern tech design forward ductless mini split system. The guys, the founders are ex-Google. They were Nest people, and there's a lot of cool stuff they're doing. And so we had them on the show, and they were awesome. And I live in New York, and I've negotiated with them to be a field tester of their equipment coming in here, and they've given me a nice sweet deal, but it's still a cost. And I've been looking at some financing options. So could GoodLeap work for me? Like, how does it work?
It could. Yeah. I mean, there are different ways to engage with GoodLeap. You can either, if you're working with, say you Google your local contractor, you feel like they've got good reviews, like I'm going to work with this guy. Good chance they work with us already. So we vet contractors to be able to even position our financing at all. And there's
Nation-
lots of different
nationwide.
financing options out there. Yep, nationwide. We have over 1.3 million customers already. We work with over 5,000 contractors nationwide. So there's a good chance the contractor that you find organically on your own works with us, or you can ask about this option. Or you can go to our own website and like connect with one of our internal teams who would then suggest in your area some contractors who might be a good fit for your project. So we kind of have two journeys through which you can find and access GoodLeap. But yeah, so we would help you if you wanted to get a loan, in this case, most likely for your mini split or some other kind of option. Yeah, we could totally help. And I also
Joel
need a new
already
mini
used the
split, so I need to look
podcast.
at this company.
Yeah, you
He
should.
already used the podcast to leverage a good deal through Quilt, and now he's going to use it to leverage a lower rate through GoodLeap.
Yeah,
Love it.
I don't do it live. I'm
Hustle's
gonna
real.
ping Julia afterwards and be like, so, if I celebrate my deal with GoodLeap, what can you do for me?
Yeah.
This is
Oh
why
my
you're
gosh.
the JCal of this podcast.
Yeah, the grift.
Love it.
No, that's super cool. I had no idea. I had no idea that it was that fintech platform. I mean, that's amazing. 1.3 million customers and 5,000 contractors that's a lot to manage.
Does that meet your definition
Yeah.
of scale, Owen? Is that qualify
No,
for you?
no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like when I think of scale, I
I
think about like with total opportunity versus like that's super impressive. And obviously 300% growth is unreal. But again, like I have this fear of when we talk about scale within this industry, does that start to make people complacent? And I don't think we have the time to be complacent about where we are relative to like the status quo industries. That's why I get a little nervous about using the word scale.
Well, I don't want to. We're gonna go down another rabbit hole. I think you've made your point on your scale. So can we let that
Yeah,
slide
let's
for
let's
now?
move on. I think we can move on.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I don't disagree with you, Owen. I think you're right onto something, but like, let me just add one little piece. Is like, it's still like getting to scale truly and unlocking next levels. Like everything I just described, we had to finance $30 billion to get to like that amount. That's like no small change. You got to get
No,
a
that's a
lot of
huge amount.
actors
Yeah.
in alignment to do all that stuff. And so I think that's where you like kick the tires, make sure it works. And I think now we are ready to scale, not just us, but like industries. So I'm with you in that we're not there yet. I think we got the right foundation in place.
Well, Julia, again, I've been a fan of your content for a while. I've listened to the show. Both Owen and I try to balance ourselves. I think that's why we always aligned as friends, and definitely a vibe we're trying to bring to the show about this. Like, there's a lot we can all agree on in the political world, and Owen and I try to not get involved in politics on this show. But I remember learning about the years and being interested in that dynamic. But all that to be said, I think recently, the reason I reached out, I was like, oh, Julia should be on the podcast because you posted something about a successful VPP. So, we're talking about the show's called Let's Talk More Action, and we've had Jigger Shaw on, and Jigger Shaw was on our podcast. We had a previous version of this called Climate Rebels years ago, and so he's been talking about virtual power plants forever. And when I was at Google, we kept trying to figure out.
Our patron saint, Jigger Shaw.
But so it's one of those things though that I feel like a lot of very smart people have been talking about for a long time as this future thing that's going to unlock everything, and we continue to have this conversation. And you don't hear many stories like I think you're about to tell us where it actually worked. We brought the players together and came to some agreement where this is being deployed. So maybe tell us how that happened and some of the details if you can.
Yeah. Well, I mean, virtual power plants. I mean, does your audience, would they be familiar with what those are?
Well, they might be, but it's always good to level set with a quick definition. Yeah.
Yeah. So like the way that I think about them, I mean, in virtual power plants, you can call them distributed power plants. You could call it flexible load. There's a lot of like ways we could talk about like what this set of technologies do, but essentially distributed energy resources. So not typically in front of the meter, though arguably there could be a case for that, but typically behind the meter assets like rooftop solar, residential or commercial batteries on site, heat pumps, water heaters, EV chargers, smart thermostats, a sort of collection of technologies the customer typically owns that can be dispatched as grid assets. So like available when the grid needs them. And so in the case of batteries, it can actually export power. Otherwise, you'd be reducing demand through the other tools and maybe shifting load to a different time of day, like turning on your air conditioner at a different time of day to pre-cool your home before everyone comes home from work and starts cooking and playing Nintendo. Is that a thing? Is Nintendo still a thing? Anyway.
It's coming back. Yeah.
The games. So I'm like, Sega? Does anyone remember Sega?
Oh yeah.
I'm
I
clearly
had my
dating
Sega
myself.
Genesis for sure.
But needless to say, um, these are flexible resources. And Jigger talks about this all the time, that they're not being fully harnessed. Like they are at, I would call, start to be proven at scale. There's like, I'm now terrified of saying scale. Let me like retract
Just say
my
it. He's a
statement.
hater. You'll learn. You'll get
I'm
all
gonna
this
I'm
out
gonna
now.
bleep it out on the back end of the podcast.
Scale's
with
a
a different
bad
word.
word now. Yeah, it is. It's like beep. So I think it's a proven technology, let me say, perhaps not at scale, in that like virtual power plants exist today. And these are assets that are responding to market signals. One of the programs, the demand side grid support program in California, has existed for a few years. It has over 700 megawatts of batteries and these distributed assets engaged in that program, which is like, could be a couple small natural gas peaker plants or one or so, of capacity there that we can harness to avoid those days where the grid almost gets to the brink or has power outages during the hottest days in, say, September here. If you were in California in, I think it was 2021 or 22, we all got this like emergency alert text message from the governor that was like, turn down your thermostats. Like, we're about to have a huge crisis. And that is not how we should be running electricity policy in the world's fifth or fourth largest economy or anywhere. And so what we do is seamlessly in the background tap these different resources in a way the customer doesn't feel any impact from, to make sure the grid has its needs met. So in this case, responds to peak demand signals. When prices get above a certain amount in California, we can dispatch our customers' residential batteries and respond to that event. What we announced a few weeks ago was our expansion into Texas. So now we're doing this also in Texas, different kind of market, but we're responding there to wholesale market signals. And in our case, we believe we've literally modeled out that the opportunity to dispatch those batteries when the grid needs them is so significant, it results in a low or no cost battery to the customer. They're going to make money back every single month by letting us borrow a little bit of their battery to serve the market, so that they actually get that free battery. Why do they want the free battery? There are also power outages. So it's really nice in Texas to have a backup battery when you need it. And all the software makes this seamless for the customer. So if you know a storm's coming in, you'd make sure the battery was charged, things of that nature. And so software makes all of this, again, so seamless where the customer doesn't even have to think about it. Not to mention they have solar and would see regular savings on their electricity bill at the same time. So it's kind of this amazing win-win of a more affordable energy solution with resilience and supporting the grid at large. And so these virtual power plants have not been tapped yet. I think they're not at scale. We've got pilot programs out there. We've got some early markets. We're actually expanding in Connecticut as well, the Connecticut Green Bank. And the opportunity is there, but how we get to that next level of harnessing these solutions is really TBD. And it's unfortunate because we just had 3 bills passed to the California State Legislature this year related to virtual power plants in different ways and shapes and forms that the governor vetoed all 3 of them. And it was really unfortunate.
Why?
Because,
do you know why? Like, what was it about the bill that made him veto it?
I'm sure she does. She leads government affairs at GoodLeap.
Well,
It's supposed to be a softball question, Joel. I was putting it up there.
All right, let's hear it.
Well, I think
let's rip Gavin Newsom here on the show.
Yeah. Look, California's been a leader in a lot of, as you know, Joel, like on paving the way for the energy transition. But I feel like it's gotten a little stagnant lately, and things like wildfires have made everyone retrench a little bit back to just gotta like build the old stuff we know, and we're leaving huge opportunities on the table, and it's not working. How do we know that? Electricity rates are out of control. Like, people can't afford their electricity bills, like most notably in California. I think it's like 1 in 4 people can't like pay a bill on time or something of that nature. Or maybe that's a national figure, but it's not working. And it has to do with where utilities are investing today. And if they always invest in new poles and wires, that's something we all pay for. Virtual power plants can help offset those infrastructure costs, saying, actually, why do we need to rebuild something new where there's congestion? We could actually just shift load and ease the congestion through a different means. And so I think the governor's decision was sort of penny wise, pound foolish, if you will, because The veto statement said, oh, it's going to cost too much money to run some of these programs or do some of the VPP reports and research groundwork that was needed. But that means we're literally leaving, I think it's on the order of $750 million a year on the table in actual ratepayer savings from these programs.
Is this one of those examples where, okay, we can maybe criticize California, and maybe it's, the wildfire issue, of course, is complex, but is this one of those examples where California maybe is overthinking things, like sometimes it does, whereas like Texas, maybe in deregulated market, you guys are deploying because there's like a little more of an innovation friendly environment?
Yeah, I mean, that's totally happening. Companies are moving to Texas, like literally, not just with their operations, but with their staff. Like we have an office now in Austin that's growing. We just invested in a new building there, even though our company's headquartered in Roseville, right outside of Sacramento, and has been since like 2003. It's a land of opportunity in Texas right now because the market rules enable that. And California is still a very attractive and important market. I don't want to pretend like it isn't. In fact, it's like perhaps the most important. So like when California stumbles like this, it breaks my heart as a resident here and like somebody who's proud to pay my taxes in this state. I'm like, what are we doing? We know better. But I do feel like, yeah, there's something that's amiss right now. We're not catching these opportunities. I almost said catching the wave because I see your like surfboard in the background, Joe. But we're like missing the wave of opportunity here. And I don't know how we fix that. The legislature did its job by passing all these bills with really strong support. I hope we can get the governor and his team on board with recognizing while something new and different may have a little bit of program administration cost, the ultimate savings to the ratepayer, which is going to be a presidential election issue, I'm sure of it, that we got to solve. We have to look to these new tools to solve the problems. What we've been doing for the past 20 years hasn't been working.
But it could be solved at the utility level, right? It doesn't have to be passed. It doesn't have to be a state issue. Is that a fair assumption of VPPs and getting them kind of deployed in more areas?
Yeah, 1,000%. A lot of like utilities have done bilateral agreements to harness distributed energy resources. So yeah, utilities have a central role to play. Usually they need some kind of regulatory construct to encourage or enable them to do this. Because I am a believer that the utility needs to be properly incentivized as well. So they need to be rewarded for not investing in traditional infrastructure. Yeah. They need a metric through which to evaluate where and how to do that. States have done it. If you look at Connecticut, they have a digital interactive map showing where there's like congestion on the grid and where they want to find localized solutions. So like California can do that too, if Connecticut can do it. So absolutely we have to work. Utilities are critical. They have a lot of smart people working on this stuff, but they're heavily regulated in states like California anyway. So we got to change the policy to help them do that too, in most cases.
Well, we know Governor Newsom is a huge fan of the Let's Talk More Action podcast, so he'll hear this message. And
yes, look, you did a lot of great stuff, but on this issue, we were disappointed to see the vetoes, and hopefully we come another, tack at it next year. Maybe the California budget won't be in such a challenging spot, and we can get it over the finish line.
Well, Owen, we're almost out of time. I'm going to get to our last question, unless you have one last annoying question.
No, unless you want to revisit the idea of scale.
I knew you were going to do
it. Well, one thing
No, go for Joel. You're up. Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Julia.
Well, you mentioned not talking about politics, but I did want to touch on, the big, beautiful bill that passed this year, which maybe this is me hashing out my traumas of working on that so closely. But maybe this gets to where you want to wind up is what does the outlook look like for clean energy solutions? I keep thinking clean energy. I know there's a lot of aspects of sustainability. I'm not a plastics person. That brings me a lot of anxiety. I think we're made up of plastic now. I'm terrified. I hope someone's figuring that out. But on the clean energy side, I think there is a runway there. And I was surprised that behind closed doors, a lot of Republican leaders get it. And I think we have a huge opportunity as an industry to ensure that we are not resting on our laurels politically, that we are engaged and talking to everyone, because we use the word clean and we use climate. And like we said at the beginning, those words kind of elicit an initial reaction from a consumer or a leader. But we're just talking about tools here. It's just technology. It's just tools. They perform services. They don't do everything. There's no miracle cure. but they fit into a complex system, and we have to make our energy system more modern and more powerful, because we are going to lose the AI race. We're going to lose the national security race. We are not going to onshore our manufacturing the way we want to, let alone have the new and latest and greatest innovation here in America writ large, if we don't have the energy system backbone to power it. And when you start talking in those terms, I think anyone starts to understand what's at stake here and how these technologies are really critical. And so seeing people step up in DC was actually really gave me some hope, in that, like, the headlines looked bad, but there is runway for solar and wind on the tax credit front, which is one of the biggest tools to scale, if not already there. While there's challenges on the grant front and, canceling government grants, and that is a whole, convoluted area right now, tax credits are what typically unlock the scale. And at least we have a good, strong roadmap coming out of the OB3 debate there that I think we learned a lot on how to talk about it differently. And so I'm hopeful that, like, the economics are strong, the fundamentals are there. We have some policy certainty for the next 4+ years. So, like, now it's go time.
I mean, we try to stay away from politics, but we also try to be optimistic here. And Owen is in solar, and we've had a couple rants on the show. Again, we also try to poke fun at some of the sustainability nerd crowd who just kind of whines about everything, and just try to say, look, there's a lot that changed recently with the legislative tone of Washington, but there's also a lot to be hopeful for. I know that's a lesson Owen likes to remind everyone here. And I think that's a good segue to our last question. Julia, you kind of touched on it a little bit right there, but we'll give you one last chance to wrap it all up. It's easy to get down here in the state of the sustainability movement, but we like to focus on optimism and solutions on this show. So what gives you hope for the future?
Yeah, well, I think it's the fact that we are proving again, and it's not taken for granted yet, but we have to keep saying a million times that these solutions work. They are tested and true. There was just a Politico report that said among the 22 states that have higher than average power from wind and solar, 17 of those 22 states have below average electricity prices.
Wow. And
that defies the red-blue divide, because 13 of those 17 clean energy heavy, low-cost states backed Trump in 2024. So you start to be like, okay, wait a minute, this transcends how people vote. It's about a tool. Again, it's just that wind turbines don't vote, solar panels don't vote, batteries don't vote. They are technologies, and they perform functions. And I think when you get down to brass tacks, make energy boring again, it's like, oh yeah, like, how we'd be silly to use all these tools in the toolkit. Because there's trade-offs with other technologies too. With natural gas, it actually serves a lot of uses, but you have to build natural gas pipelines and infrastructure, and that's really challenging to do too. There's NIMBYism. Like, let's not pretend there's not trade-offs to every kind of energy resource out there. And I think we're finding, and what gives me hope, is that technologies continue to come down, technology costs continue to come down on the clean energy front, and performance continues to enhance and be improved, with, like, say, more fire-resistant batteries as an example. And the proof is in the pudding. We're showing that this is actually no trade-offs, right? Like, and I think that gives me a lot of optimism. And if I could say one more again. Make energy boring again. That's my campaign slogan for president. Yeah. But I borrowed that from one of my co-hosts, Neil Chatterjee, who was the former chair of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission under President Trump initially. But he always talks about, let the nerds dominate energy, let the engineers get the work done, and let's make it less political, because it's not. Electrons aren't political.
It shouldn't be.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. But we live in a political world. We're lucky to live in a democracy. So let's also make sure that we're educating all of our leaders appropriately. And that goes on both sides of the aisle, because I think that we talked about California, super majority Democratic state, and yet we're still struggling with how to adopt the energy technologies of the future. So it goes for every leader out there. They're very busy people. And so I have a lot of empathy for that. They're juggling everything from healthcare to, garbage service to you name it. So how do we get on their radar? It's on us, industry and advocates and NGOs and our whole coalition to make sure we're educating them appropriately. But if I could leave you with one last little optimistic thing.
Please.
I mentioned how, we all have a role to play in making our homes, I think, more comfortable, sustainable. We all are making those decisions already every day. But the whole world deserves it. And so one thing I'm proud of that we do at GoodLeap is the company covers all the overhead for our nonprofit Give Power. And Give Power builds clean energy and clean water systems all over the world. We're in 28 different countries, and we just do straight solar and storage on places like hospitals and schools and food processing centers, but also these solar powered desalination systems. And it's amazing when these are hard places to work, like in Haiti, where there's been all kinds of political turmoil. And like Give Power was one of the only sources of clean water on the island with our solar powered desal system. And like that team is dealing with everything from like gang violence to you name it. And it's all local staff who like go to work every day, making sure people have access to this technology and really the clean water it produces. And so things like that give me hope, because it's like, there's a lot of localized solutions that maybe are not at scale, but there's 2+ million lives that have been improved by it so far. And those are people like you and me who deserve to have clean water. And I think we're chipping away at it. And that gives me a lot of optimism. And I judge what's called the Zayed Sustainability Prize. United Arab Emirates has a prize for startups. The finalists will be announced in January. We just announced the semifinalists, and there's so much innovation out there. So many entrepreneurs who've dedicated their entire lives to solving these problems. And every time I get to cross paths with one of them, I'm just so humbled and like inspired by like how much we can unlock here.
That's great.
Cool stuff. Way to end it. Yeah, we're humbled and inspired too by you, Julia. So keep up the good work there at GoodLeap and everything you do with your podcast. And on that note, so we're going to wrap up here. Anything else to plug? So where do we find you? Follow you on LinkedIn. There's GoodLeap. What else is there to make sure the audience knows where to find you?
Yeah, GoodLeap, good LEAP. You can find me on Twitter, JM Pyper, on LinkedIn, other places. Shoot me a note. Running around a conference near you. I used to do so much more social media, which my child has taken up my bandwidth for that, but I still check all of them. I've moved more into lurker status, but I'm still there and love to connect with folks, especially in person when we get a chance.
Well, thank you so much for joining. I think you said you have a child on the way, so
yes,
congratulations.
Yeah,
good luck.
Yeah. Thanks. Oh gosh, I haven't had time to even think about it. Once the legislative session ends, I can think about becoming a mother for the second time. Legislation first. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get this child like an air miles number, I think, because we've been traveling a lot this year. But no, thank you for that, and yeah, more to come. And check out Political Climate, our podcast, and we'll make sure to give you all a shout out too. You want to get into some of those policy and politics debates on energy and climate today.
Yep, we'll celebrate it, put it in the show notes. Well, thanks again, Julia. Thanks, Owen. Thank you, everyone out there, for joining. You can also find Owen and I on LinkedIn, usually actively antagonizing the more talk, more complaining sustainability crowd. You can find this podcast and more great content at lesstalkmoreaction.com. If you like the podcast, please subscribe, like, and share with your friends. And until next time, we encourage you to ask yourself, what are you doing to take action to make the world a better place?